Hello, I am Tess Grove, a landscape architect living in the suburbs with my husband Drew and our 8-year-old son Tommy. What I am about to tell you is the story of how a simple holiday gift changed everything in our family, and how sometimes the smallest gestures can reveal the biggest truths about the people we love. After we returned from visiting my parents during the holidays, my son Tommy remained unusually quiet throughout the entire drive home. When I finally asked him what was wrong, he reluctantly reached into his backpack and pulled out a handful of holiday gift envelopes. His voice barely above a whisper as he said, "Mom, Grandma June gave all the other kids money for the holidays, but she didn't give me anything." My heart immediately sank as I understood the petty, shameful thoughts that had motivated my mother's actions. I smiled gently as I took the envelopes from Tommy's small hands, pulled out the largest one from our own collection, and placed it firmly in his palm. "This one is from Mommy," I told him, "and it is bigger than all the rest." After comforting Tommy, I pulled out my phone and, with an expressionless face, canceled the $50,000 luxury European vacation that I had booked for my parents. The highway lights streaked past our car windows in long bands of light, appearing briefly before being swallowed by the darkness. Tommy had fallen asleep in his car seat beside me. His small body was curled up in the safety restraints, his long eyelashes still damp with tear stains, and his little brow remained furrowed even in sleep. My heart felt as though it was being squeezed by a rough hand, slowly tightening with a dull ache accompanied by a suffocating sensation. My mind involuntarily replayed the scene from that afternoon in my parents' backyard. Mother June Grove had been sitting in that faded wicker chair, surrounded by a cluster of relatives like a queen issuing commands. She had pulled out a thick stack of holiday envelopes from a floral fabric pouch, her face beaming with proud satisfaction. "Come here, Brandon. This is from Grandma. Study hard so you can get into a good college," she had said, stuffing the thickest envelope into my brother's son Brandon's hands. The boy had waved it triumphantly and made a face at my son Tommy. "This one is for Sophia. And this is for little James." Every child had joyfully received their envelope, and the backyard had been filled with happy chatter. Only my Tommy had extended his small hand, waited for what seemed like forever, then timidly pulled it back. He had looked at June with hopeful eyes and quietly called out, "Grandma." June had acted as if she hadn't heard him at all, patting her empty floral pouch and immediately turning to chat with my aunt about neighborhood gossip. Tommy's little face had gradually fallen, and the light in his eyes had slowly dimmed. I had been standing by the door, just a few steps away, feeling a chill run from the soles of my feet straight to the top of my head. I hadn't said a word, simply walked over, took Tommy's cold little hand, and led him away from that noisy yard. Now that chill was still coursing through my entire body. The bathroom door slid open with a whoosh, and my husband Drew emerged surrounded by steam. He was toweling his wet hair when he noticed me sitting in the darkness and casually asked, "Why don't you turn on the lights?" I didn't answer his question. "Your mother-in-law didn't give Tommy a holiday envelope today," I stated in an extremely calm tone. Drew's toweling motion paused for a moment. "Really?" He came over and sat down beside me. "Mom probably just forgot. She is getting older, and her memory isn't what it used to be." I had been hearing the same excuse for 6 years, and my ears were practically numb to it. Every time my mother did something inappropriate, he would brush it off with "she is getting older." That is just how she is, or she didn't mean it. In the past, I had tolerated it for the sake of family harmony, but today I didn't want to tolerate it anymore. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, opened the familiar travel app, and held the screen in front of his face. The cold light from the screen illuminated his shocked expression. The words "cancellation request submitted" seemed particularly stark in the darkness. "What did you do?" he exclaimed, his voice rising sharply in disbelief. "You canceled the trip?" "Yes," I replied, putting my phone away, my tone still flat and emotionless. "Have you lost your mind?" he said, lowering his voice but unable to hide the panic in his words. $50,000 isn't small change, and there will be hefty cancellation fees. Besides, All our relatives know about it. We specifically booked this European vacation for your parents, and now you are canceling it. Where does that leave our reputation? Reputation, always reputation, in his mind. My parents' dignity and our reputation as a couple always came first. I pulled at the corner of my mouth, letting out an extremely soft, cold laugh. Our son's feelings are more important than your reputation. It is just one holiday envelope. How big a deal can it be? Drew irritably ran his hands through his hair. I'll talk to Mom later and have her make it right. Did you really need to be so impulsive? Yes, I did. I stood up and looked down at him. Today's incident was the final straw that broke the camel's back. We have been married for 8 years, and every demand, every instance of favoritism, every entitled expectation from my family had been like bricks stacked on my heart. Now, that wall had finally collapsed. Drew also stood up, his face flushed red. What do you mean, the final straw? Tess, explain yourself. What has my family done to you? The bewilderment and grievance in his eyes struck me as utterly ridiculous. A grown man-child who could never see what others had sacrificed for him, always feeling that the whole world owed him something. Just as we were in the midst of our heated confrontation, my phone rang at the most inappropriate moment. The caller ID showed Mom. Drew looked like he'd found a lifeline, frantically trying to grab my phone. Let me answer it. I'll explain to Mom. I stepped aside to avoid him, my cold fingers gripping his extended wrist. His wrist was burning hot, while my fingertips felt like ice, right in front of him. I pressed the answer button, then immediately put it on speaker. June's excited voice immediately filled the room. Hello, Tess dear, why hasn't the travel agency contacted us about processing our visas yet? June's voice was full of anticipation and a hint of bragging, as if she was already walking through the luxury palaces of Europe. I could imagine her sitting on her living room couch at that moment, with that smug expression on her face. Drew's face immediately turned ashen white. He frantically gestured at me, silently mouthing words, begging me to turn off the speaker. I ignored him completely. Mom, the trip has been canceled. My voice was soft, but in the silent living room, it was as clear as a pin dropping. There was silence on the other end for a full 5 seconds. What did you say? June's voice suddenly rose sharply, so piercing it almost burst my eardrums. Cancelled? What gives you the right to cancel it? Your father and I already have our passports ready. Are you deliberately trying to prevent us from going? What gives me the right? I repeated her words with a hint of mockery in my tone. Mom, let me ask you something. When you were giving out holiday envelopes to the children today, did you forget to give one to Tommy? June was momentarily speechless. Of course she hadn't forgotten. She had done it deliberately. She wanted to use this method to constantly remind me that in her heart, a daughter's son wasn't as precious as a son's son. After a brief pause came an explosion of rage and embarrassment. One stupid envelope. How big a deal is that? A few dollars. Are you really going to gamble with a $50,000 trip over this? You are being incredibly petty and immature. Here we go, her usual tactics of deflection and turning the tables. Coming home for Christmas, you brought such pitiful gifts. Look at your brother Josh. He bought us gold necklaces and gold bracelets, and you, just some cookies. And when I told you to make Brandon's envelope a little thicker, why didn't you listen? Do you think our Brandon doesn't deserve it? Brandon is the eldest grandson in our family. A barrage of complaints came at me like rapid fire, all about trivial old grievances. Drew was sweating profusely beside me, pacing like an ant on a hot pan, repeatedly trying to grab the phone. But I stopped him each time with my gaze. I listened quietly, waiting for her to pause for breath before speaking slowly and deliberately. Whether I am mature or not depends on who you are comparing me to. I only know that whoever makes my son sad for 1 moment, I'll make them unhappy for 10. Money is a small matter, but attitude is a big matter. If you don't treat my son with respect, I have no need to treat you with respect. My words were clear and logical, each one like a nail driven hard into June's facade of respectability. The other end of the phone completely erupted. You ungrateful daughter, you'll be punished by heaven for this. How unlucky I am to have given birth to such an ungrateful daughter. They say a married daughter is like spilled water, and it is absolutely true. Drew. Let Drew answer the phone. I want to ask him if he is just going to stand there and watch you abuse your mother like this. Familiar wailing began, mixed with the sound of beating her chest and stamping her feet. I didn't give her that opportunity. With a swipe of my finger, I hung up directly. The entire world became quiet instantly. Drew reached out his hand, seeming to want to say something, but I raised my hand and slapped his away hard. The sharp smack was particularly loud in the silence. He stood there stunned, looking at his reddened hand, then at my ice-cold face. Tess, you. Drew, let me make something very clear to you today. I interrupted him, my gaze piercing straight into his eyes. This matter is not up for discussion. The European vacation is cancelled, and not one penny more will be spent. Regarding the envelope incident, my mother must personally apologize to Tommy. Either you go right now and convince my mother to understand her place, or our little family will completely cut all contact with my family from now on. Your choice. I gave him an ultimatum, every word carrying uncompromising finality. Having said that, I turned and walked into the bedroom, firmly closing the door behind me, shutting out his shocked and helpless expression. Over the next 2 days, my phone was practically blown up with calls. Those relatives who usually lurked silently in our family group chat, only surfacing during Thanksgiving and Christmas, had now transformed themselves into champions of justice and moral judges. Aunt Catherine's call came first. Tess, dear, you've gone a bit too far with this. No matter how wrong your mother was, she is still an elder. How can you hold such a grudge against her? It is embarrassing if word gets out. I replied directly. Aunt Catherine, if your child was publicly humiliated, could you be this magnanimous? Catherine was so stunned by my response that she couldn't speak for a long time before hanging up the phone resentfully. Next came my Aunt Linda. Dear Tess, your mother is so upset she can't eat. She is 60 years old. Can't you just apologize and make her happy? Young people should understand the importance of honoring their parents. Aunt Linda, honoring parents is a matter of affection, not obligation. Besides, they don't deserve that honor, I replied coldly. Drew was overwhelmed by this barrage of phone calls. He spun around me like a top, constantly repeating the same few phrases. Tess, just let it go. Your mom is getting older, let's just give in to her. All the relatives are watching, it won't look good if this gets out of hand. Just apologize, rebook the trip, and this whole thing will blow over. I ignored him completely. And with each attempt at persuasion, my heart grew colder. Finally, annoyed beyond measure, I blocked the phone numbers of several of the most offensive relatives right in front of him, one by one. The world finally became peaceful again. Drew watched my actions, opened his mouth as if to speak, but ultimately said nothing, only letting out a heavy sigh, his face showing exhaustion too thick to dissolve. Over the weekend, while we were helping Tommy build Legos in the living room, my brother Josh called. Drew looked at the caller ID and glanced at me hesitantly. I took the phone directly from his hands and put it on speaker. Drew, what is your wife's problem? Are you even a man, just letting her carry on like this? Josh's hostile voice boomed through the phone as soon as the call connected. Because of your wife, Mom and Dad can't even hold their heads up in the neighborhood. Everyone's laughing behind our backs about having a rebellious daughter who married a weak son-in-law. It is just about those stupid envelopes, isn't it? She is upset that Brandon got more money than Tommy, right? Is it really worth all this fuss over such a small amount? I'll transfer the money to her myself. Just tell her to stop making a scene. His righteous tone made it sound as if I was the one being unreasonable and petty. I gripped the phone, feeling like my blood was flowing backward. I am not upset about the money, I said into the receiver, enunciating each word, my voice so cold it could freeze. I am disgusted by the ugly attitude of your entire family, thinking you can leech off us and act like it is your right. I am disgusted by how you treat my son's understanding and restraint as something you can trample on at will. You want to transfer money? Fine. Over 8 years of marriage, we've subsidized my family for at least $150,000. You can transfer all of that to me right now." Silence immediately fell on the other end of the phone. I hung up directly and tossed the phone onto the couch. The living room was dead silent. Tommy seemed to sense that something was wrong and stopped what he was doing, looking at me with concern. I took a deep breath and gave him a reassuring smile. Looking up, I saw Drew sitting dejectedly on the couch, his hands buried in his hair, his back looking utterly defeated. "Tess," he raised his head, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse and exhausted. "We can't fight them. Your brother, your mom, your dad, and all those relatives, they're all on the same side. There are only two of us. Maybe we should just give up." My heart sank to the bottom when I heard these words. I looked at him, at this man I had once thought I could entrust my life to, and felt unprecedented disappointment in my eyes, isolated and helpless. For the first time, I truly understood the weight of those 4 words. It turned out that in this war, I had been alone from beginning to end. Monday afternoon, I was in the company conference room with my team finalizing details for a landscape design project when my phone vibrated on the conference table. It was a call from the building's front desk. "Miss Grove, there are 2 elderly people at your office door claiming to be your parents. They're crying and making a scene in the lobby. And we can't calm them down no matter what we try. Could you please come down?" My heart sank heavily. What had to come had finally arrived. They had actually come directly to my company. I rubbed my temples, asked the project manager for leave, grabbed my car keys, and rushed outside. I hurried to the building lobby and could see a crowd gathered around the reception area from far away. My parents, Drew Grove and June Grove, were sitting on the marble floor with 2 huge suitcases beside them. June was crying and complaining to a passing colleague, her voice shrill and the content unbearable. "I am so unfortunate, raised an ungrateful daughter. She won't let us live. Married daughters really are like spilled water." My father, Drew, was crouched nearby, hanging his head and chain-smoking Marlboros, his face full of sorrow, perfectly playing the role of a silent, long-suffering, honest man. Colleagues were pointing and whispering, and when they saw me appear, all eyes turned to me with curiosity and scrutiny. I felt my cheeks burning with a surge of anger rising from my chest to my head. June spotted me immediately. Like an enraged lioness, she jumped up from the floor and charged at me, reaching out to grab my hair. "You ungrateful thing! How dare you show your face? Let me tear that mouth of yours." I was prepared and stepped aside to avoid her grabbing, then gripped her wrist and said in a voice cold as ice, "If you want to make a scene, do it at home. Don't embarrass yourself here." I practically dragged her, using all my strength to pull these 2 unwelcome visitors out of the office building and into my car, away from all the prying eyes. As soon as we got in the car, June began throwing a tantrum on my leather seats. "I don't want to live anymore. There is no justice. A daughter trying to force her parents to death. You must apologize to me today. Book that European trip for me again. Otherwise, I'll go to your company and make a scene, embarrassing you in front of all your colleagues." Drew was sighing and adding his support from the side. "June, say less. Your health is important. Tess, your mother was just confused for a moment. Just give in to her." A perfectly coordinated performance. Looking at this clumsy drama unfolding before me, I suddenly found it utterly ridiculous. Seeing that I remained unmoved, June climbed up from the passenger seat, brushed the dust off herself, and with a roll of her eyes came up with a new scheme. "Just apologizing isn't enough. You've hurt my feelings, so you must give me compensation. From now on, you must give us $5,000 a month for living expenses. You are my daughter, and supporting us is your natural duty." I was completely amused by her shameless attitude. Very well. It seemed that today was the time to settle all accounts once and for all. I stopped wasting words with her and simply pulled out my backup phone from my purse and pressed the play button. A clear recording immediately filled the car. Don't worry, our daughter married well. Her husband Drew is successful and makes good money in the city. Tess is very obedient, too. When I say go east, she doesn't dare go west. Their money is basically our money. I can spend it however I want. That European vacation is nothing. When they buy a big mansion, I'll move in and have them take care of me. After all, daughters should honor their parents. This was something I had secretly recorded during Christmas when June was bragging to relatives. The triumphant, arrogant tone in the recording contrasted beautifully with her face, now twisted with shock, creating a perfect irony. June's and Drew's faces instantly turned pale as paper. The recording continued to echo in the car, each word like a resounding slap across their faces. You actually recorded us. June pointed at me, her lips trembling, unable to form a complete sentence. Drew's face, which had spent years playing the honest man, also showed panic for the first time. Just then, my phone rang with my husband's ringtone. Drew was off work and looking for us. I answered the call, told him we were in the parking garage, and asked him to come down. A few minutes later, Drew appeared and froze when he saw the situation in the car. He looked at me, then at his pale-faced in-laws in the passenger and back seats, his face showing shock and disbelief. I ignored him and pressed the pause button, putting my phone back in my purse. But this was just the beginning. I turned and pulled out a thick account ledger from the file bag in the back seat. This was an account book I had kept since our second year of marriage, with every large non-routine expense for my family clearly recorded. I turned around in the driver's seat and, under their 3 pairs of shocked and uncertain gazes, opened the first page of the ledger. My voice wasn't loud, but it was exceptionally clear, and in the enclosed car, it sounded like a judge reading a verdict. Second year of marriage, Mom. You said your back hurt and asked us to buy you a massage chair, $12,000. Third year of marriage. You said the house needed renovation, and we contributed $50,000. Starting from the 4th year of marriage, annual fixed living expenses for you, $24,000 a year, 6 years, totaling $144,000. 2 years ago, Josh's son Brandon wanted to learn piano. You said the grandson's education couldn't be delayed, so you asked us to buy him a Steinway, $30,000. Last year, Dad said he wanted to get a new car, and we contributed $60,000, and this European vacation, $50,000. I read each item aloud, and with every entry, June's and Drew's faces grew paler, and my husband's head hung lower. Not counting Thanksgiving and Christmas envelopes, not counting various daily purchases, just the large expenses clearly recorded in this ledger. Over 8 years of marriage, the total is $374,000. I closed the ledger, raised my eyes, and calmly surveyed all 3 of them. Now, I want to ask, in these 8 years, have you spent even 1 penny on our little family, on Tommy? From Tommy's birth until now, the clothes he wears, the shoes on his feet, has any single item been bought by his grandparents? When he was 3 and had a high fever and pneumonia requiring hospitalization, did you visit him even once? Even when we come home for Christmas, bringing you gifts big and small, the envelope you give Tommy is always the smallest among all the children, or like this year, completely ignored. Every sentence was devastating. June went from initial shock to desperate justification. But you are my daughter. Isn't honoring us your duty? Was it easy for us to raise you? Honoring. I laughed coldly. I've only heard of parents loving their children and children returning that love with filial piety. Who have you loved? Who are you giving back to? Taking the money we work so hard to earn to subsidize Josh's family and boost your reputation. That is not honoring, that is leeching. Seeing that reasoning wasn't working, June wanted to return to her old tricks, slapping her thighs and preparing to wail. I didn't give her that chance and directly delivered my ultimate weapon. Oh, and there is one more thing. The house we live in now, when we bought it, the down payment was $500,000 total. I used $300,000 from my inheritance fund, and you contributed $200,000. Drew, you know about this. I looked at my husband. Drew's face was completely bloodless. At the time, for the sake of appearances, both our names were put on the property deed. Now it seems I was too naive. Since we're settling accounts, let's settle them completely. For this house, I contributed $100,000 more for the down payment, based on current market prices. Shouldn't my share on the property deed be adjusted accordingly? These words were like a bombshell, completely hitting June's and Drew's vital points. The house was their lifeline, what they thought they could always use to control me. June pointed at me, making choking sounds in her throat, too angry to speak. Suddenly, her eyes rolled back and her body went limp, collapsing onto the seat. "Mom!" My husband Drew cried out, frantically trying to rush over to help. I blocked him. "Don't rush," I said with a coldness bordering on cruelty. "Let me call an ambulance first. Examination fees and emergency call fees will all be on me. I'll deduct them slowly from that $374,000. The ambulance came screaming and left screaming. June miraculously recovered 1 minute before the paramedics arrived. A drama of fake fainting ended with her getting what she deserved. After this earth-shattering settlement, our home fell into an eerie silence. My parents were arranged by Drew into the guest room, like two defeated roosters who no longer dared make any noise. Tommy had been sent to the neighbor's house early to avoid this storm. That evening, after I brought Tommy home, gave him a bath, and tucked him into bed, I came out of his room. Drew was sitting on the living room couch without the lights on, only moonlight streaming through the window to outline his dejected silhouette. Hearing my footsteps, he looked up. "Tess," his voice was terribly hoarse, "I am sorry." This was the first time in 8 years of marriage that I had heard these 3 words from his mouth. Not brushing me off, not trying to smooth things over, but a genuine apology from the heart. "I didn't know. I didn't know your mom would be so terrible. That ledger, those things, you never told me about them. I was too confused. Always letting you suffer." His eyes were red, his voice thick with shame and regret. I looked at him without speaking. My heart was like a block of ice that had been frozen too long, unable to melt instantly even with this hint of warmth. The damage had been done, trust had been shattered. It couldn't be easily repaired with just one "I am sorry." Seeing my silence, Drew stood up from the couch, walked over to me, and asked carefully, with a hint of pleading, "Tess, will you give me another chance? I'll handle this properly. I promise, I'll never let you and Tommy suffer this kind of treatment again." I still remained silent, just quietly looking at him, trying to discern from his eyes how much of what he said was true and how much was false. The next morning, while I was still preparing breakfast, Drew knocked on the guest room door. I leaned against the kitchen doorway, listening to the commotion in the living room. "Father-in-law, mother-in-law, let's have a talk." This was the first time Drew had spoken to my parents in such a formal and serious tone. June seemed to still want to put on airs, mumbling complaints about something. Drew raised his voice somewhat, with unprecedented firmness. "This home was built by Tess and me together, not by me alone. Tommy is our son, the heart of this family, not someone who can be ignored by anyone. From now on, please don't interfere in our family's affairs. Honoring you is our responsibility, and I will give you fixed monthly living expenses. But that is all. Any additional large expenses must have Tess's approval. And Josh's family? They are an independent family. We have no obligation, much less responsibility, to endlessly subsidize them." In the living room, June's crying and screaming started again, cursing Drew as an ungrateful son-in-law who forgets his wife's family after marrying. Drew was also sighing and saying things like harmony brings prosperity to the family. But this time, Drew didn't back down. "If you think I am an inadequate son-in-law, then I'll be an inadequate son-in-law, compared to making you satisfied. I don't want to disappoint my wife and son." Hearing Drew's words, the taut strings in my heart that had been stretched for days finally loosened just a little. That man who habitually avoided confrontation and smoothed things over seemed to finally be learning to grow up. My parents eventually went back home with their tails between their legs. Not voluntarily, Drew personally bought their tickets and sent them to the return flight. Before leaving, June tried to hold my hand and say a few soft words, but I calmly avoided her. Some cracks once formed can never be completely repaired. Our home temporarily returned to long-lost peace. Drew seemed like a different person. Coming home on time every day, proactively taking on most of the household chores, and on weekends accompanying Tommy and me to the park and science museum. He tried to make up for past deficiencies with his actions. I watched his efforts without much emotional fluctuation, only feeling that this was what he should have been doing all along. I knew this wasn't over. That family of leeches wouldn't give up so easily. Sure enough, half a month later, Brother Josh called Drew's phone again. Drew put it on speaker. Brandon recently set his sights on a summer program in England. Says it will help with his English and college applications to the Ivy League. Josh's tone was as natural as if he were discussing the weather. It is not cheap, $30,000. Could you discuss it with Tess and help us cover it for now? After all, Brandon is the eldest grandson of the Grove family. Drew's brow furrowed. Josh, I made it very clear last time. We have no obligation to help you pay for your child's educational expenses. If you want him to attend such an expensive summer program, you should figure out how to pay for it yourselves. This was the first time Drew had so decisively refused Josh. Josh, on the other end, was stunned for a moment, then began cursing. Now that you have money, you think you are better than everyone else. You don't even acknowledge your brother-in-law anymore. Aren't you afraid of breaking Mom and Dad's hearts? You've been completely bewitched by that worthless sister of mine. The language was vile and unbearable. Drew's face turned iron gray as he hung up directly. Not long after, I discovered strange activity beginning to appear on my Facebook and in our family group chat. Some unknown rumors started spreading quietly. Did you hear? Tess looks down on her parents because they're from a small town and won't let them come live in the city. She also won't let Drew honor his in-laws and won't even let them come home for Christmas. I heard she swindled her parents' retirement money and spent it on luxury goods for herself. Even worse, there were several doctored text message screenshots. In the images, my profile picture was sending vicious, abusive messages to June's profile. It takes just one mouth to spread rumors, but breaking legs to refute them. They had decided that since the hard approach wasn't working, they'd try the soft one, using public pressure to completely destroy my reputation. Drew wanted to argue with them in the group chat, but I stopped him. It is useless, I said. Looking at those black and white lies with complete calm. If you try to argue now, it will only make things worse. They'll say you are lashing out in embarrassment. I didn't say a word in the group chat, nor did I leave the group. I just quietly took screenshots of all those slanderous statements, one by one, preserving evidence. The calm before the storm is always brief. I knew that the real counterattack was just beginning. I called a high school classmate who worked back in my hometown. She was a gossip queen who knew every piece of local news in the entire county. Through her, I quickly learned about my parents' situation after they returned home. It turned out that to save face in front of neighbors, they were still bragging about how filial Drew and I were, saying we were just too busy with work to go to Europe right away. Josh's family, having lost our financial support, was living tightly, and their attitude toward my parents had taken a sharp turn for the worse, often giving them cold shoulders. June's little social security check was nowhere near enough for their family to drain. After hearing all this, a plan to pull the rug out from under them gradually formed in my mind. I found a friend who worked at the Mayo Clinic in the city and asked her for a favor. Last year, I had taken my parents for comprehensive health checkups. I asked my friend to help me get a copy of my father Drew's medical report. The report showed that Drew had a history of high blood pressure and diabetes, with severely elevated blood sugar and blood lipids. At the end of the report, the doctor had clearly recommended in bold text that he must quit smoking and drinking, strictly control his diet, eat light and low-oil foods, and monitor his blood sugar regularly. Meanwhile, June, to save trouble and cater to Drew's preference for heavy oil and salt, always made greasy food. She even thought it was no big deal for men to drink a little whiskey, often indulging her husband with 2 drinks every day. This was typical ignorant and irresponsible behavior. I took this medical report to the largest CVS pharmacy nearby. I bought the most advanced blood glucose monitor and enough test strips for 3 months. Then I ordered 3 large boxes of sugar-free nutritional products, cereals, crackers, artificial sweeteners, everything you could think of. I packaged all these items, along with the medical report copy with key points highlighted and detailed doctor's instructions, into one huge package. For the delivery address, I didn't write my parents' home. I wrote the community center back home. The recipient was the community director. In the package note, I specifically wrote a line, "Dear Director, these are health products and medical equipment I bought for my mom and dad. Dad's health isn't good, so please be sure to personally hand over these items along with the medical report and doctor's orders to them in front of everyone. And please help remind them to take care of their health, take their medicine on time, and eat a light diet. Thank you from daughter Tess." After doing all this, I put down my phone and let out a long breath. June, Josh, you like to put on shows and care about appearances, don't you? Then I'll give you an even bigger stage. I'll use the filial piety that you value most as a knife to personally puncture your hypocritical facade. This move was called an open strategy. Let's see how you handle it. 3 days after sending the package, news came from my hometown. My high school classmate called me excitedly, her voice full of barely concealed laughter. That move of yours was absolutely brilliant. You know, yesterday the community director received your big box of stuff and announced over the community loudspeaker for your parents to come collect it. All the idle elderly folks in the community ran over to watch. The director took out everything you bought one by one in front of everyone. Read your medical report aloud, and read your instructions too. Your mom's face turned green right then and there, greener than the bitter melons by the village entrance. A few days ago she was telling everyone how unfilial you were, and then you go and send evidence straight to the community center. Now the whole community's opinion has completely changed. Everyone's talking behind her back, saying you are a daughter who has done everything possible for your parents, and that she is the one being unreasonable and demanding, not knowing what is good for her. Favoring sons over daughters, she deserves the backlash. Your brother's family has practically become pariahs in the community now. Everyone knows they were trying to siphon money from your family. I listened quietly, a faint smile playing at the corner of my mouth. Everything was going exactly as I had expected. Rumors stop with the wise. But even more so with irrefutable facts. I had used concrete actions to prove my position to everyone. I acknowledged filial piety, but blind obedience and being bled dry. I wouldn't stand for it. Another week passed, and Drew received a call from June on the phone. June's voice was no longer the arrogant tantrum throwing of before, but full of exhaustion and grievance. She said Josh and his wife, having failed to get money from us, now came home every day to fight with her, throwing pots and smashing bowls. They said the food she worked so hard to make had no flavor and dumped it directly in the trash. They also called her a useless old woman who couldn't even control her own sister. June cried bitter tears over the phone, saying she was so upset she had a heart attack and begged Drew to bring Tess back immediately to stand up for her and support her. Drew listened with furrowed brows, unconsciously looking at me. I shook my head at him and silently mouthed 2 words. "Send money." Drew understood my meaning. He said to the phone, "Mom, I am really swamped with projects here and can't get away. I'll transfer $5,000 to you first. Go to the hospital for a checkup and buy yourself some good food. Josh is also your son, and he has an obligation to take care of you and Dad. You favored him from the beginning because you were counting on him to support you in old age, right? Now it is time for him to show his filial piety." After Drew finished speaking, without waiting for June to cry more, he hung up the phone. He had done well, fight fire with fire. Just as June had used favoring sons over daughters to hurt us, now Drew used the same words to kick the ball back to them. When endless demands are cut off, conflicts naturally explode within their own ranks. I could imagine how desperate and desolate June felt after hanging up that phone. For the first time, she was tasting what it felt like to be despised and turned on by her most favored son's family. I wonder if in that moment she remembered all the compliance and contributions that Drew and I had given her over the years. Did she regret it? Maybe. But this was just the beginning. A month later, bad news came from home. Father Drew had suffered a mild stroke due to years of poor diet and emotional stress and was hospitalized in the county hospital. June called Drew with tears in her voice. She said Drew couldn't move half his body and could barely speak clearly. Brother Josh's family had only dropped off $2,000 at the hospital, and then, claiming they were busy with work, never showed up again, let alone help care for him. June was overwhelmed and exhausted at the hospital. Truly at her wit's end, for the first time on the phone, she truly lowered her proud head. "Tess, I am sorry." Drew put the phone on speaker and I heard her choked voice. "Before, it was all Mom's fault. I was blinded by favoritism. Too biased. I shouldn't have treated Tommy that way, hurt the child's heart. Favoring sons over daughters was wrong of me. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Could you and Drew please come back and see your father?" Her voice was filled with regret and helplessness. Drew and I exchanged glances, both seeing complex emotions in each other's eyes. After discussion, we decided to go back. Not because of her belated apology, but for Drew lying in the hospital bed, who was after all my father and Tommy's grandfather. The day before we left, I took Tommy to the city's largest Toys R Us. I let him choose freely, buying his favorite Lego spaceship and a complete set of Ultraman cards. I also took him to the supermarket and bought a huge pile of his favorite snacks, filling the entire trunk. Tommy asked me in confusion, "Mom, aren't we going to see Grandpa? Why are we buying so many things?" I patted his head and told him gently, "Yes, we're going to see Grandpa, but first, we're going somewhere else." Back in my hometown, we didn't go directly to the hospital. I drove to my brother Josh's neighborhood and parked downstairs. I had Drew take out half the toys and snacks from the trunk. Then, holding Tommy's hand, I personally rang Josh's doorbell. Emily, my sister-in-law, answered the door. When she saw us, especially the bags and packages in our hands, her face showed surprise and embarrassment. Brandon rushed out from inside, his eyes going wide when he saw the Legos and snacks. I pushed Tommy forward a step, crouched down to look into his eyes, and taught him word by word. "Tommy, tell your brother that you want to share half of these toys and snacks with him because you are cousins, and good things should be shared." Although Tommy was still a bit confused, he obediently repeated what I said in his clear child's voice. "Brother, I want to share half of these with you because we're cousins." This one sentence was like an invisible slap, hitting every adult present hard in the face. Josh and Emily stood there, faces red with shame, almost wishing they could disappear into the ground. I had used the gentlest method to deliver the most resounding slap. I had also planted a real seed about sharing and family love in my son's heart. At the county hospital, the ward was filled with the smell of disinfectant. Father Drew lay in the hospital bed, his face gray and defeated, with a crooked mouth and drooping eye. When he saw us, tears flowed from his cloudy eyes. My husband Drew's eyes immediately reddened as he quickly walked to the bedside and grasped his father-in-law's hand. June looked like she had aged 10 years, her hair gray and white, her face full of exhaustion. When she saw me, she immediately stood up from her chair, nervously wringing her hands. I didn't say much, just took the bill from Drew's hands and quietly handled all the hospital procedures, then contacted a home care company to arrange for a professional caregiver to provide around-the-clock care. After doing all this, I returned to the ward. June immediately grabbed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Mom really knows she was wrong." Her hands were rough, but her palms were sweaty with nervousness. I calmly withdrew my hand and looked into her eyes. Mom, I accept your apology. But some things, once they happen, they happened. Once they're over, they're over. You can't pretend they never occurred. My tone was calm but carried unmistakably clear boundaries. We'll take full responsibility for Dad's illness and we'll fulfill our duty to support you. But our money will never again be used to subsidize Josh's family without limit. Every family should be responsible for their own life. We are, and so should Josh's family be. After I finished speaking, I looked at Father Drew in the hospital bed. He blinked with difficulty and gave me a slight nod of approval. After Father was discharged from the hospital, his recovery went well, though he still needed a long period of rehabilitation. They suggested coming back to the city with us to recuperate. Drew asked for my opinion. I agreed. But before they came in front of Drew and them, I laid down 3 rules. First, no complaining or criticizing others in the house, maintaining a positive family atmosphere. Second, respect our family's lifestyle and don't interfere with our spending or child-rearing views. Third, and most importantly, in this house, Tommy is the only little master, and everyone must respect him, love him, and never again show any form of favoritism or harm. June nodded repeatedly through tears, agreeing to everything. On their first day moving into our house, after dinner, June brought out a thick envelope from her room. In front of all of us, she solemnly placed it directly into Tommy's hands. Tommy, this is what Grandma owes you. Grandma was wrong before, and Grandma apologizes to you. Tommy looked at the envelope, then up at me. I smiled and nodded at him reassuringly. Only then did he accept the envelope and quietly said, "Thank you, Grandma." The family storm that had been triggered by one envelope came to a close with the solemn delivery of another envelope. After my parents settled into the city, the atmosphere at home underwent a subtle change. June seemed to have completely transformed, becoming much more restrained in her words and actions. She no longer interfered with our lives or complained about the food not suiting her taste. She began clumsily learning to care for Tommy. She would wake up early to prepare Tommy's favorite sandwiches. She would put on her reading glasses and read him storybooks word by word. She would go to the school gate and wait with a group of young mothers to pick up Tommy after school, her face showing pride I had never seen before. Tommy was a sensitive child who could feel the genuine kindness and clumsy attempts to please from his grandmother. He gradually went from initial distance to eventually running into Grandma's arms when he came home, sharing interesting stories from school. Aunt's brother Josh called again, trying to borrow money indirectly. Before Drew could speak, June grabbed the phone and for the first time sternly refused with a firm expression. Your sister's family also has to live, and household expenses are big. As the older brother, you have hands and feet, so stop always thinking about your sister's money. After hanging up, she let out a long sigh, as if finally setting down a burden she had carried for years. My relationship with Drew also became closer and more solid after we had weathered this storm together. We learned to communicate, to fight side by side, and to protect our little family. 6 months later, Father's health had basically recovered, and he could walk slowly with a cane. They decided to return home. In June's words, there is no place like home. The day we saw them off at the airport, before going through security, June pulled me aside and took out a bank card from her pocket, insisting I take it. Tess, there is $50,000 in here, our retirement money. The password is Tommy's birthday. We wronged you before. This money isn't much, but it is our token of appreciation. Please take it and buy something nice for Tommy. I looked at the sincerity in her eyes and ultimately pushed the card back to her. Mom, we can't take the money. Keep it and take good care of yourselves. I paused and gave a genuine smile. We'll come home for Thanksgiving next time. June's eyes immediately filled with tears. At the departure gate, Tommy hugged June's legs, his little face showing reluctance to part. Grandma, will you come see me again? Yes, Grandma will come see my grandson whenever I have time. June crouched down, hugged Tommy tightly, and kissed his face. Watching this scene, I leaned against Drew's shoulder, feeling warmth and relief in my heart. I knew that the cold winter that had hurt us because of one envelope had finally passed completely. A family that truly respected each other, had clear boundaries, and was filled with warmth was slowly forming in the sunshine.